Waiting for the live. Are we on live? Okay. All right. You're right. It's red too, so that means we are. Anyway, I would like to. You know what? Since Isaiah's coming to preach, I'll go ahead and do like the intro that I always do when I welcome everybody to Hope Community Fellowship, and I always tell them, "Hey, if this is your first time with us, we're so glad that you've joined us. Or if it's your first time tuning in online, we're happy that you've joined us also. And for those of you who have come back, then we're so happy that you're here again. Today we have Isaiah coming to preach, and this is not his first time preaching here. You guys should be starting to get somewhat used to him. And you know what? This is an opportunity while he's home from college this summer to actually give him a chance to come and do a series for us. You know, it's one thing to get to put together a sermon to come and to preach for you guys, but to actually pray about and listen to the Lord and see where the Lord actually takes you and putting a series together. I know it doesn't seem like it would be a hard thing, but it does take a little bit to actually figure out, what does the Lord want me to share? Lord, what are you laying on my heart to share for 3 weeks in a row? What am I going to do for 3 weeks in a row? So you know what? This is my cheap and shameless plug for next week and the following week. Isaiah is going to be here preaching for 3 weeks for us. So I would like to introduce him once again, and I can't wait to hear what the Lord has laid upon his heart. So, Isaiah Tidwell.
Good morning. A lot of familiar faces, but again, if we haven't met, we will over the next few weeks here. Great to be here. I see some renovations. Every time I come here, it's something new. We got a running joke though that every time I come, I'm also looking a little different. Hair, maybe mustache, whatever. It was the glasses. I'm running out of options though, so I may color my hair or something. I'm not sure. Yeah, series. So this is my first 3 week series. I've done like a two-parter, but never quite three. And I was with my brother last week, and he asked me, how do you pick, or how do you know what to preach on? I told him, I said, you know what? I've known you for a little while, so I'll let you in on the secret. You pray about it. He goes, okay. What if you don't hear anything? I say, well, then you guess. And that's kind of where I was at. That is a little daunting at first, getting closer to that date where I was supposed to be here because I didn't have anything. So that night I got home pretty late, went straight to bed. As I went to bed, I saw my Bible on my nightstand, and it had about 7 specks of dust, which means it's been a day or two since I opened it and read it. And I'm sure we've all been there. And I was thinking, I really should. I should get back to it. I should read it, but I'm like, I'm tired. I said, no, I'm going to read it. So then I was in Deuteronomy 6. That's the 10 Commandments. Right as I was about to put it down, I kind of felt a nudge, go on to 7. I said, okay, so I read through 7, and then I felt again another nudge from the Spirit, go to 8. I read 8, and in Deuteronomy 8 is where I got the series that we'll be in for the next 3 weeks. So if you turn to Deuteronomy 8, verses 11 through 14, this is going to be our foundation for the idea that we'll be in over these next 3 weeks. I'll give you a second to turn there. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 11 to 14. I'll begin and read. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I commanded you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply and your silver and gold is multiplied and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. So for the next 3 weeks, our key idea here is going to be remembering the Lord. Remembering the Lord. Just to get a little bit of interaction, would you turn to your neighbor and just tell them, like, remember the Lord. Remember the Lord. Now we'll spend these next few weeks, we're going to look at one man I like the Old Testament. We're going to be in the Old Testament. We're going to look at one man and see, what his challenge was, what his adversity was, and then how he lived after it. In these first several chapters of Deuteronomy, Moses is talking to the Israelites. He's preparing them to live a life in the promised land. They've been in the wilderness for years. They've been living off manna for years. right? They've had sand in their sleeping bags for years. They're ready to get out. Um, but Moses has to really prepare them. So he gives them the 10 Commandments. He reminds them of their rebellion. He reminds them how faithful God is. And he's just giving them instruction. And this one of the key instructions he makes is to remember the Lord when you make it. You see, when they're in the wilderness, they may be frustrated. They may resent God, but they don't really forget God. They don't have a choice. Where are they going to go? Back to Egypt? Where are they going to go forward? They're kind of stuck. They have to rely on God. They don't have a choice. So while they may have negative emotions at times, they're still acknowledging God. But the danger is, what the Lord is saying is, when you get to the promised land, you're going to have seemingly more options. You're going to be at a danger to before you may, hold a grudge or maybe have a little hatred in your heart. You may forget me altogether in the promised land. He goes, that's very dangerous. That's why he's instilling on them, you have to remember us, and you have to remember me when you make it into the promised land, into the land flowing with milk and honey. So this week we will be looking at Gideon. So if you would, now we just read in Deuteronomy 8. If you want to put your sticky mark or sticky note or bookmark there, we'll go over to Judges 6 now. Judges 6. And our main text for today is going to be in chapter 8, but I'm not going to assume that everybody knows the story of Gideon, or maybe it's been a minute. So we're going to quickly run through it. We're going to refresh ourselves, and then we'll be picking up in chapter 8. So in chapter 6, it opens up with the cycle of judges, right? So we have Israel. They do evil in the sight of the Lord. The Lord delivers them to their enemies. They suffer for a little bit under oppression. They cry out to God. God raises a leader or a judge to deliver them from the enemies. That's the cycle of judges. So here we see this cycle, right? We're stepping right into it. The beginning of chapter 6, the Israelites are oppressed by the Midianites. The Midianites. Now, there's another group called the Philistines. They're probably a little more popular. And they have, a star player you've probably heard of. His name's Goliath, a 9-footer, big, bad, that's the Philistines. They're going to get up face to face. They're going to beat you down, right? Direct confrontation. That's their style. The Midianites are a little bit different. They're like raiders. Okay, what they do is they travel in big numbers and they're fast. So they swarm in, they swarm out. They're not constant oppression, right? So what they do is they'll let Israel harvest, or plant. When it's time to harvest, they'll swarm in suddenly, quickly, without warning. They'll take their produce, they'll take their livestock, they'll leave Israel in a weak, famished state, and they'll leave. That's the cycle. So Israel is constantly in this weak, famished state, and that's a tough place to be for them. Morale is definitely low. The good part about facing Goliath is if you hit him in the nose hard enough, you can get a little bit of momentum, maybe, right? You see Goliath goes down, it's like, all right, maybe we can do something here. But with the Midianites, you can't get up, you can't get on your feet, right? So they are really struggling right here. And that's where we see the call of Gideon in verse 11 in chapter 6. Now, the angel of the Lord comes and he appears to Gideon. And what's Gideon doing? Gideon's at a wine press hiding his wheat. So he's trying to prepare for the next swarm. He's trying to hide some food just so he can survive. So when we find Gideon, he's not thriving, he's surviving. He's doing what he can to eat, okay? The Lord calls him. He says, Gideon, you mighty man of valor. Gideon checks around. He's another man. He's, what are you talking to me? Yeah, okay, but Lord, I'm the weakest in my clan, because he was in the weakest tribe of Israel there. And he had a bunch of excuses why he couldn't do it. God says, no, you're the one. I will be with you. Go. So Gideon had to take care of some business first. He has to destroy the altar of Baal, okay, because the Israelites are worshiping another god. Gideon takes care of that, destroys the altar, puts up an altar for God. Okay, that brings us to chapter 7 here. Gideon has an army now, about 32,000 men. The problem is that God says to Gideon, that's too many. It's too many men. Why is that too many men? Because if I win, or if you win with 32,000 men, we're going to be tempted to say, we did that. We could have done that years ago. God said, no, that can't be the case. I remember when I was in my first year of college, I was in a class that was, I probably had no business being in. It was a little more challenging. But we had a note card for each test. And I'll be honest with you, I forgot to fill out my note card before. My classmate next to me, he said, dude, what are you doing? was pretty quick on the spot though. I said, "You haven't read Judges 7." I said, if I pass this test with the note card, it's going to be my glory. But if I don't have a note card and I pass this test, it's up to God. But I want to instill, if you do something like that, make sure you hear from God first. All right. Make sure you hear from God at the wine press first. I failed that exam. Okay. Make sure you hear from God first before you go in like this. Make sure you're good. So we're down to 20 or 22,000 men leave because God says, okay, Gideon, tell them if they're afraid, go home. Gideon says, if you're afraid, go home. 22,000, they don't think twice. They're out. We're left with 10,000 against about 120,000 Midianites. Okay. The Lord said to Gideon, people are still too many. I'd be sweating a little bit if I was Gideon, maybe. Take them down to the river. Let's see how they drink. A little bit odd situation, but okay, let's see it. So if they get on their knees to drink from the river, send them home. If they get, they kneel down and they cup and they drink from their hand, keep them. So after we do that, we're left with about 300 men. So Gideon is now taking 300 men against the 120,000 Midianites. Those are not good odds, right? But the pro is that if you win with that, then you have no option but to say God did it. That's only a God thing. So what they do is, here's the strategy at the end of chapter 7. Gideon gives every man, he gives them a torch, an empty jar, and a trumpet. He splits them into 3 groups, and they surround the Midian camp at night. And then on his go, on his trumpet sound, they're all going to blow and break their jars at once, throw up their lights, and then the Midianites are going to wake up, see everyone surround them with lights and loud noise. They're going to think they're ambushed. And as the texts say, they actually turn on each other. So the Midianites, in a panic, start killing each other. And they're fleeing. And again, we see the victory through God delivered over the Midianites, and they're free. So that's kind of the story here with Gideon. And it's kind of weird because I've been a church kid pretty much my entire life. That's where the story ended. In my Sunday schools, in my the sermons I'd hear, that's where we ended. And there's a ton of sermons in there, I know. But what I didn't know until later in my life when I actually read through Judges is in chapter 8, there's a little bit more to Gideon's story. So in the beginning, in the first half of Judges 8, we see another battle. If we go to verse 22, that's where we're going to really dig at today. We see something interesting to me that I never knew. So in verse 22, it says, then the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. Now, they want a king. They want to make Gideon a king. They want an established bloodline here. And it's conflicting because on one hand, the nations around them, yes, they all have a king. They all have an established bloodline. But also, that's a man. You want to replace God with a man. So what they want to do is they want to, instead of trusting God to raise up leaders during the times appropriate, they want to establish a king and a bloodline. And they have a lot of confidence in Gideon. Look at the last half of that verse in 22. He says, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. This goes against like everything God just did, right? That was the whole point. That's why he's sitting with 300. Now here they are saying Gideon saved us from the hand of Midian. Luckily, though, Gideon knew that, you know what? I know what really happened there. It wasn't me that won that battle. I only had 300 men. I know I was found in a wine press. Like, I can't reasonably take credit for that. I know I'm not a king. So Gideon in verse 23 declines. It says, Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. Good. Gideon passes the test. So he rightfully declines, and he points them back to God. Because again, he can't in good conscience take that throne. He knows it wasn't him. So even though the Israelites think it's Gideon, Gideon knows it's not Gideon. Good. Again, you pass with an A. Gideon remembered the Lord is God. But did he? Okay. It doesn't end there. Let's look at verse 24. And Gideon said to them, let me make a request of you. Every one of you, give me the earrings from his spoil. For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, we will willingly give them. And they spread a cloak, and every man threw it in the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels. What just happened? Gideon declines the throne, but he sends a Venmo request right after. He cashes in. You know what? I won't be your king. But like, let me get those earrings. Maybe I did. I did a little, so I deserve a little bit. Like, let me cash out. And they willingly do because Gideon, in their eyes, just saved them from the Midianites. So it's ironic. He declines the throne with his mouth, but then he immediately acts like a king. Immediately acts like a king. It's funny because motives matter. Motives matter. I have a roommate, and I remember one time I was going to the store, and he was standing by the door. So I told him, I said, I'm running to the store. You need anything? No, I'm good. I'm good. Okay, well, I get back 30 minutes later or whatever. I walk in. I have my bags in my hand. He goes, what'd you get me? I said, I didn't get you a thing. He goes, why not? I said, I asked you. And you said no. I said, he goes, you're supposed to do it anyway. Perfect example. Motives matter. So now I don't ask him at all. I just go. But we see that speaking doesn't carry a lot of weight. Actions carry a lot of weight here. Actions carry weight. Actions consistently carry weight. Verse 27. And Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city in Ophrah. And all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. Okay? So Gideon makes an ephod. What's an ephod? Essentially, an ephod it's a garment worn by priests. Now, the text is pretty vague on why he did this. It's likely not meant to be worn. It's likely meant to be put on display. Maybe it'd be like a trophy or reminder. It was like a monument. Now, it may be with good intention that it was made. Maybe it was to serve as a reminder of the victory. Maybe it was to clear his conscience for taking all that money from the people. Maybe he was just trying to do God a favor in a sense, like keep God happy. Have we ever done that? You cue up that worship song, pray for an extra 30 seconds, read that extra chapter, you go to that service. Now, all good things to do, of course, but motives matter. Are you doing it because you love God, you want to worship him more, grow with him? Or are you doing it to keep him good, keep him happy? Motives matter. So, again, building this ephod, he did it, I believe, for God. I'm sure he did it with decent intention. The problem was, in Exodus 20:25, God commanded that if you make an altar to God, make it with plain, unfinished stone. Why would that be? So people don't get distracted by the wealth. Gideon made this ephod out of the gold he just received. So, again, while it may have been with good intention, he violated the command. So now you have this ephod, and it says in verse 27, the people whored after it there. And it became a snare to him and his family. So this ephod became an idol. And, the people, the problem is that they start worshiping it. They're worshiping the symbol of victory and not the one who gave them the victory. And the symbol of freedom, not the one who gave them the freedom. The symbol of the Lord, but they're not worshiping the Lord. They're worshiping this ephod. And it says that this ephod became a snare to Gideon and to his family. Now, I'm sure Gideon didn't intend to make a snare to himself. Who would? Who would do that? Who's going to make a snare for themselves to get caught up in? This past spring, I was in the Appalachian areas, and I was at a drug rehab facility, and I was talking to some people in that facility. And one of the guys that stuck with me, I was talking to him. He was my age. It was kind of like looking into a mirror. He looked pretty similar to me. We were talking. He said, yeah, I went to college, played football for a semester, but I started drinking. And I started drinking some more. And I got in some trouble. And I got in some more trouble. The next thing you know, I'm here. Now, I am sure that when he first started drinking, when he first got to school, he didn't intend to be sitting across from me at this drug facility. I'm sure of that. But that's how it goes. We got to be careful of snares. Careful of snares. And we do that by being literate in God's word. If Gideon would have known Exodus 20:25, he probably wouldn't have done this. That's why we have to be literate in the word. So even with good intention, we have to make sure we're aligned with the word of God here. So it became a snare. Verse 28. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel. They raised their heads no more, and the land had rest for 40 years. So again, Gideon won. Gideon was successful. Midian was defeated. The problem was that victory was the beginning of Gideon's decline. He became complacent. He didn't become evil. He didn't rebel against the Lord. But he just kind of stopped. He became complacent. He became comfortable. He started living like a king. That's the funny part. I don't think the hard part was the battle. The hard part was living consistently in submission to God after the battle. And the biggest enemy Gideon faced was not the Midianites. The biggest enemy Gideon faced was his own heart that he had to conquer day by day by day. That was his biggest enemy. But it's not as apparent or scary as the Midianites, so it went right under the radar and he didn't even realize it. Verses 29 to 32, we'll read here. Jerubbaal, that's Gideon, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives, and his concubine, who was Shechem, also bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash's father at Ophrah of the Abezerites. Here's a tip. If you ever don't know how to pronounce something, you just say it confidently. Because how many of you know how to pronounce Abezerites? So if I just said it confidently the first time, none of you would have batted an eye. But now you know I don't know what I'm talking about here. Gideon had many offspring and many wives. Now, this was generally accepted in the time. That doesn't mean it was right, but it was more accepted that men would have many wives. But it was a sign of wealth. You would use it to flaunt your wealth. And guess who had a lot of wealth during these times? Kings. So Gideon took up many wives. Again, he was living like a king. Do you see the irony here? A few verses ago, he declined the throne. The Lord will rule over you. But did he let the Lord rule over him? No, he's taken the money. He's taken the wives. And get this may be my favorite part. This concubine bore him a son, Abimelech. Guess what Abimelech means? You're not going to guess, I'll tell you. My father is king. That's literally what it means. So this assumes that Gideon is assuming, a dynasty here. He assumes it will go to Abimelech when he dies. So he declined the throne with his mouth, but not his actions. This is why it is so important to follow through, right? Your words, easy. They're good. They're important. Easier. The hard part is living it out. That is where your actions will speak. Like they say, actions speak louder than words. That is very true. Very true. Because if you stopped at verse 23, you're going to say, Gideon finished strong. Good for Gideon. Gideon gets a gold star. But if you read on, you realize his actions directly contradict what he just said he would do. So, verse 33. As soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals and made Baal-berith their god. As soon as he died, Israel turned. Now, this is also important to realize and recognize why we follow God. We don't worship the messengers. We don't worship preachers. We don't worship, big figures. We worship God. There was when I first was getting very serious about my faith, there was a preacher I listened to daily. I listened to his podcast daily. I tuned in every Sunday. I love this preacher. Several months later, I found out that this preacher had stepped down from the church for a sexual misconduct offense earlier in his career. And that threw me off for a while. So I was like, wow. And I was reminded that's why we follow God and not the man. Perfect example of that. So as soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals. Now, this also suggests that if they turned that fast, their faith probably wasn't that strong. I would say that. And that's the danger of complacency, is it withers away your faith on the inside. So it'll look good on the outside, but on the inside, it's withering away. And then the fall will look sudden. The fall will look quickly and we'll say, how did that happen? But it started long ago. There was this tree I used to drive by all the time. It was a big tree, strong tree. I don't know what type of tree it was. Very strong. And I remember after a storm, in honor of the storms this week, I guess, I drove by after the storm and this tree was just, it fell. Giant tree, hit the floor, shattered. I'm thinking, what in the world? That was a pretty strong tree. So I was curious enough, and I apparently had enough time in my day to get out of the car, and I looked at the tree. I could see that tree was dead long ago. Long ago. Long before that storm, that tree was dead. Complacency kills from the inside. I don't have numbers, I don't have statistics, but in my experience, in my observations, I've noticed that the rate of seeing people falling away, while yes, I see people go through tragedies and walk away from God, I see far more people get complacent and wander away from God. I see that much more than I see a tragedy. What I do see is I see tragedies a lot of the time bring people closer to God. I see that a lot more. Complacency is a dangerous thing because I rarely see people just walk out of complacency without a tribulation, without a trial. It's a dangerous thing. Many fall through complacency. Verse 34, and the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies on every side. This is a direct violation of Deuteronomy 8's command, right? What we just read in the beginning, direct violation of that. Moses warned the people. He warned them, when you make it, when you get in the promised land, when you get in the land with milk and honey, when you're on top, when it's peaceful, remember the Lord your God. We see this play out in Judges. The people don't. They get peace, they get stability, they forget. And when Gideon dies, not only do they forget God, they pledge allegiance to a different God. Now, in 2026, we don't have idols, but we may do stuff similar. We may be tempted to do stuff similar, right? Hobbies, jobs, phones, technology, whatever it may be, relationships. It's very easy to, when you get in a comfortable position, to make something else an idol, even if it's not a statue of Baal or any of that. Just a good reminder there. Now, the greatest danger is success, not Midian. That's the greatest danger to these people. Verse 35. And they did not show steadfast love to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. So Gideon, what he did, his victory, now meant nothing to these people. Didn't mean anything. They moved on. And that's just wow. Because, to us, we look at Gideon and his legacy is, the big battle. We know that. We respect that. But to these people, he won the battle that quickly faded. They turned immediately. Immediately they turned. Trial, or what he should have done, what Gideon should have done, what we should be reading about is Gideon, a man who, when he won, then led the people back to Israel. He helped them focus. He helped them live the lifestyle focusing on God. That's what we should read. But instead, thousands of years later, we're just reading how he lived a comfortable life and died. I mean, like I said earlier, he died in his own home. He died comfortable. And that's what we read about now. His legacy faded, and all we can do is speculate later what should have happened. So to close here, in trials, adversity, tribulation, they may be the most unpleasant experience you will face in the Christian life. I won't deny that. But I wouldn't say they're the most dangerous, because a lot of the times they'll spring you forward closer to God. The most dangerous time, I would say, is in times of success and blessing. That's when you're most tempted to forget God. And that is dangerous. Maybe that's why God kept him in the wilderness for so long, to really try to instill, you didn't get in that promised land on yourself. That's why God sent 300 men to try to get in their heads, you did not win that battle by yourself. Maybe in your own life, that's why you may be in wilderness seasons for so long, because you did not get out of that by yourself. But it seems that time and time again, no matter how long people are in the wilderness, no matter how many miracles or supernatural works we see this reoccurring battle or pattern that people forget and fade. all the Israelites do, it seems, in the Old Testament. They forget about God. Remember the Lord your God when he delivers you. That's our challenge today. God, thank you for this time here. Thank you for your word. Thank you for these people. Thank you for the testimonies we got to hear earlier. And you're a God that follows through. You're a God that delivers. Help us to, in these moments, when we get there, when we're delivered, when we're walking in the blessing and success, help us to remember you. Keep our eyes on you, remember you. If we start to forget, quickly call us back, God. Quickly remind us of who you are again and what you've done. And don't let us forget you, Lord. If anyone's going through a time of wilderness, encourage them. Encourage them and encourage them, Lord. Again, bless these people. Help us to go and live out a life this week that reflects you and the gospel of Christ. In Jesus' name, amen.